I want to move quickly on to Kirsty, who's the Early Years Strategic Lead at Newham Council, who's going to be talking about virtual assessments. Over to you, Kirsty. Thank you.
Yeah, so very quickly, as early people said, back in kind of March 2020, which feels like a lifetime ago, you know, my responsibility is also to oversee the kind of early years aspect, but also the commissioning of children's centres. We were really, really fortunate that our children's centres were all based in schools at that time, because the guidance allowed us to stay open. So I know that, you know, for others on the call, your circumstances may have been different, but we were able to keep open a kind of visual face-to-face centre the whole time. Although that was the case, we very quickly mobilised both the early help assessment tool and a health virtual assessment tool to ensure that families still receive the right help at the right time. During the lockdown, and it has continued, our referrals into our early help system quadrupled into the kind of children's centre referrals that are centralised in the borough. So we knew that we couldn't stop this service. It had to continue, and it had to continue at a rapid pace. So very quickly we mobilised a number of things. One of them was the kind of virtual safeguarding protocol. So we've done that jointly with social care. So we ensured that across the system, across children and young people services and our commission services, that there was one safeguarding protocol. Just to give you a context of what that meant is, if a family was undertaking a virtual assessment, the expectation, of course, and I'm happy to share some of this if people want to email me afterwards, of course, that we would try and have cameras where possible. And we had very clear guidance about the cameras, the use of people's phones, you know, so that kind of safeguarding both for staff and families. And we developed a clear protocol in partnership quite rapidly about that. And then also looking at if children weren't seen, so if there were kind of 3 interactions where children weren't seen, then a doorstep visit would take place. So we would always ask to hear the child, see the child. It was very clear in the script, so we did develop a kind of process and a script. If the child wasn't seen, or there was a reason, oh, the child's asleep, obviously if we were concerned we would go sooner, but the very clear process was on the 3rd time we would do a doorstep visit. There was very clear safeguarding process for staff around what a doorstep visit meant and how that would look. What we also done was looked at the continuation of the early help frameworks. We do have a practice framework for children's centres, and we adapted that to the virtual world. So we still maintained the timescale of 5 days from referral into first contact. And we also continue to QA, because we do commission our children's centres, to ensure that those kind of key safeguards that we put in place around our practice framework were kind of continued throughout the whole time. Regarding the virtual practice guidance, that's what I've referred to earlier. So that was best start in life. So that was both targeted and universal. So we were able to maintain a universal offer through groups, online groups. And again, we had very clear practice guidance and expectations of how to do that. And we would spot check that, the quality of that as well. There were challenges around access to relevant technology and programs. So very quickly, through a kind of tech improvement program, we had to ensure that everyone delivering virtual assessments were able to do that with the appropriate tech in place. And I think a really important point when I move on is the virtual keeping in touch contacts and the script. So keeping in touch, there was an expectation that all early years providers, even if they were closed or open, their key worker would keep in contact with the child at least once a week. And through that kind of virtual keeping in touch, again, if there are any concerns, they were linked straight into the Best Start in Life team. There was a clear script, which includes our Help Newham offer, because in Newham we were disproportionately impacted by COVID. And there was a whole script of support around kind of food, wraparound support, parenting, befriending. We were able to mobilise a whole virtual offer. Parenting Befriending was a phone line which children's centre staff ran for children up to 8. And we were able to do that quite quickly. I think we had all of that in place by May 2020. We also established a kind of online feedback tool with all families that accessed both the universal and targeted support. Next slide, please. Okay, very quickly, so I've got 3 minutes. So within our kind of health assessments, we were also able to go on to a virtual assessment tool. So a number of things our health team mobilised very quickly was a kind of business continuity plan, and there was a whole guidance around who should be priority for both face-to-face. As I'm sure many of you, kind of the health visiting service was pulled into different roles within the NHS. So to keep this system running, there was a priority system that was used that was very consistent across the borough. There was an individual family risk assessment which took into account multiple vulnerabilities, and again that was consistent using the information they hold as health visitors and also the wider early help system. We also had the use of the same clinical assessment template, so again it was available, and as part of the virtual assessment we were able to be flexible based on the parents' needs, so it's either a kind of WhatsApp video, Zoom video, so we didn't just use one form of kind of program. It was really flexible to the family. And then we had the triple S guidance for targeted face-to-face, which is safe, sharp and sure, and that was a very clear guidance that if a face-to-face contact was required, then how we keep our staff and families safe whilst we do that. Can I have the next slide, please? So some strengths and challenges, so that we saw some real benefits. I think one of the kind of key benefits from the health service is the kind of did not attend, or do not attend, did not attend rates actually reduced. So we saw that some of our kind of mandatory health checks and the number of mandatory health checks actually increased during this period, which I think is brilliant for our most youngest children in Newham. All of the settings undertook keeping in touch calls, and because of that, the EYFS progress checks were also able to stay. So whilst DfE disapplied those during the first lockdown, we were able to retain those checks because we also had a large majority of our settings stay open. We had the development of virtual integrated reviews, so we very quickly merged our integrated reviews because our kind of checks continued. So we were able to establish that, and we've got a whole kind of protocol for how that's delivered. We continued our kind of early notification process for SEND, and again moved all of that onto virtual. We had a kind of the development of virtual parenting support programs, which enabled us to continue our reach and actually increased our reach for some of our, I would say kind of our not harder to reach, but those families that may not have engaged in the past, especially some of our no recourse to public fund families. Some challenges very quickly. So challenges meeting the needs of families who experience inequalities. What I would say is that, for all of us here that do this as our day job, we knew that there were still families that were very forthcoming, who were confident and had their voice, and we still felt that those families that were really experiencing the most inequalities were still sometimes quiet, and that's something we know we need to continue to develop. Families newly arrived into the borough is a core challenge for us, and continues to be a challenge for us, and I'm sure for many, especially around London. Undertaking accurate reviews. I think there was an over-reliance on parental and carers' views, especially kind of around the kind of health checks. And at times we're thinking that over-reliance has maybe missed some opportunities, which I know there's kind of some national reports about. So again, it's something that we want to build upon about how we capture the child and those observations in a meaningful way. And then I think just ensuring good quality and consistency. I know my slides dropped off a little bit, but just to finish off, we're on a journey. Our biggest challenge is language barriers. We have over 140 languages spoken in Newham, so we know that the kind of the digital inclusion piece, which we'll come on to, I know is a continued challenge, but I think the fact that we were able to maintain a kind of virtual assessment versus a face-to-face has enabled us to still reach some of those families and definitely build upon what we've learned so far. Thank you everyone for listening.